what I'd like to do now is move over to a panel discussion and see how the new ways of working, how internal culture and the right skill set can be harnessed to drive innovation within your companies. So in addition to the great speakers who you've just seen earlier on, I'm also joined by Michael Wing. I'd like to introduce him. He's the Director of Finance Transformation at Direct Line Group. So if we go into the first round of questions, Martin, I'm going to start with you. So based on your session earlier on, being relevant is key to success now. What role do you see employees or the wider workforce playing in this?
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, absolutely, you said it. Resilience, we know that's a given, that's important, but actually being relevant is what allows you to leave sort of behind, frankly, the competition and take advantage of a very, very difficult situation in the world. I think there's kind of a couple of key points, really. The first point is about a sort of a redefinition of what employees and workers are supposed to be doing. And it seems like it is very subtle, but it's actually very fundamental to say that we should be moving away from engaging, treating employees as simply delivering a product or a service, and towards more of a mindset where they are servicing a subsection of the market. And this is pretty fundamental because, one, when you're focusing on delivering a product or service, it's very transactional. Your job is very defined and delineated. When it's more about servicing a subsection of the market, that invokes more concepts of sort of servant leadership and requires more flexibility and more sort of accommodation. And this is appropriate because we've seen increased power essentially from customers and changing in expectations. So as more connection, more direct consumer channels, more retail channels digitally, more social media, etc. There is more power with customers. And so if we are just sticking within our box and delivering that service, we can be falling behind those who have this different mindset. And that mentality and that mindset really does have to start from the top. The second point, I think, is more obvious, which is about feedback. So we already discussed the fact that companies need to listen to the richest source of insight out there, which is customers and their audience essentially. But what the statistics show is that people are only willing to share that feedback if they are given the proper opportunity to do so. So I think that employees, the ones that get ahead really organizationally, they focus on receiving feedback as part of their daily focus. And then organizationally, we need to make sure that there are channels that are established. It could be digital channels, email, Slack, physical town halls, whatever it might be, but making sure that that feedback is given an opportunity to be shared across the organization and that the people gathering it are rewarded for doing so. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Martin. Michael, next question for you. So as a company that sees itself as a very innovative company, what steps are Direct Line Group taking to enable you to continuously innovate and serve your customers better?
Thanks, Wayne, and thanks for being here. It's a fascinating subject of conversation. There's probably two key things which I suppose Direct Line Group is focusing on. The first one is mainly around, and it goes back to what Antonio was saying about leveraging the technology. So we've, I suppose, traditionally been a bit slower at utilising a lot of tech and digital and data capability. So what we're doing now, particularly in the changing environment, is focusing very heavily on digitalising a lot of our journeys, be those claims journeys, be those finance journeys, which I've predominantly been centred on, and actually understanding how we can create value out of data. So we are an insurance company, we hold a lot of data, and we do a lot of programs driven around data. I think the key for us is how do we commercialize that and how do we create real value out of it, rather than just pulling lots of different trends and insights and analytics. So that is a real, it's going to be a real enabler for us, and it's a really area of high focus, particularly around using the segmentation that data provides, overlaying that with the technology platforms that we've got. And it's a really exciting area that Direct Line Group is looking at. The second key one is actually linked back to, it's around mindset and behaviours. So we are trying to change our mindset and behaviours within the group. We're very much now focused on an agile mindset. So we've introduced agile as a concept into the organisation. We've restructured ourselves and key parts of our customer-facing parts of the organisation into agile tribes and agile squads. But the most important thing we're trying to do is embed the agile mindset that it brings. So a focus on empowerment in teams. So allowing teams to go away, problem solve, and come up with solutions and actually run with it and own that is really important for us, rather than a traditional leadership style of directing and that type of approach. We're very much now aligned on business outcomes across the organisation. So like probably any group previously, everyone had their own priorities and you would sort of hope they'd all align, but it was a bit of a gamble sometimes. We spend a lot of time internally now using the agile OKR processes to align all our priorities and all our focus on real business outcomes, which are obviously geared around the customer and actually providing innovation. Probably the most important one actually for me, particularly from a finance perspective, is we're really focusing on keeping things simple. So simplicity and not overcomplicating things is at the heart of a lot of what we do. And that really allows us to drive innovation at speed. Sometimes there's always an issue of, if you've got a problem, you come up with a very complicated technology or data-driven answer, and you sometimes forget about the real simplicity of what you're being asked to do. So a lot of what we do is really trying to strip back problems, look at the end results, particularly in finance, and really come up with really simple ways of doing it. And we, in finance, we have phrases like, make finance simple. It's not, and it shouldn't be that complicated. And I think the final thing that behaviourally we're trying to do is just embed a culture of test, learn, adapt, rather than sort of big bang approach to projects, big bang approach to solutions, is actually try and solutionize as you go along and actually not worry about if you don't quite get it right first time. And that is a real key thing. It's a hard one to get right culturally, because no one likes getting things wrong. Feedback is a key part of that. But test, learn, adapt is going to be critical for us in the future, being able to innovate and also to understand what customers want and actually how we react to them.
Thank you. So Sandra, next question for you. You shared some examples before on, how Oracle is innovating. Could you outline some of the main characteristics that Oracle has had to enable and foster around continuous innovation, to better serve your customers?
Sure. Similar to many speakers today, we've seen a huge opportunity when we moved to the cloud. And there was an opportunity to embrace the advancements in technology hugely. And we knew and we could see that would help evolve our finance team in the new digital world to a great extent. So we set a stretch goal and we set a very high bar for ourselves, and that's how the automated close came to be. But not only that, looking inwardly, we wanted to set a goal that our customers could relate to. And there's two reasons for that. The first was that we knew that no one company would have all of the answers, and through partnering and sharing ideas with our customers, that would yield greater innovation. And we've done that in a number of ways in which we harness that culture of continuous innovation at Oracle Finance. So I would say the first one would be leadership. Our teams, they know their job. They know the detail, they know the processes, and we encourage and empower them to find ways to work smarter. I mentioned that in my examples earlier on. But because we are finance, always front and center of our mind is that measured, controlled environment, and everything we do aligns to that. So we can give and afford that empowerment to our team. And much to what I think it was Martin spoke to earlier, was around that agile mindset. To empower and trust in your team. So leadership in that regard has really afforded us to do that with our teams. The next thing is, as I mentioned earlier, that continuous loop with product development. Feedback is just so powerful. And you could see the benefits we yielded from that earlier. We also have a dedicated finance transformation and automation team, and we have staffed and resourced that from the core finance team. So we took the bandwidth that was freed up from changing how we did what we did into a new team. Now that not only resonated with the team that had an interest in emerging technologies and to really grow and jump into a role that was really interesting for them, but it also showed our commitment and our investment to the strategy and that goal that we wanted to achieve that one-day close. So it's very powerful in dedicating that team to underpin our goal. The other thing is, again, you could see highlighted in my example earlier on, is that speed of innovation to execution. Having that agile mindset to shift and move and change and up or scale back your plan, whichever way, for users' needs as they evolve and change is very, very powerful and critical when working with technology and people. The emphasis would be the last thing, which is the emphasis on forward focus, not spending excessive time compiling and reporting on last quarter's results. Our one-day close initiative is an example of how committed we are to that. We believe our finance team should be adding value real time. So that for us has been really powerful characteristics of how we've been on our journey to date.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandra. I just had one small question to add from that came live. Actually, what was your team's, how did they handle the change? Was there a massive fear or did they embrace the innovation and the change?
So from our team internally, change always comes with apprehension, but it was interesting because the initial reaction was, this is a stretch goal, this is huge, how are we going to achieve that? But it very quickly shifted to challenge accepted, break it down into milestones, lay it out, and let's get through this. So it actually went from apprehension and nervousness into a real buzz of, how do we get this done, and energy to succeed. So it was fantastic in that regard. So yes, always with change, there will be apprehension, but I would say break it down, keep talking to the team, help them to understand that they are invested in this as much as you are, and bite-sized pieces and small steps and bring you on your journey. So it's very powerful for our team.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandra. Now, Antonio, I'd like to ask you a question. You spoke earlier on about the disconnect between productivity growth and the rapid technological advances that we're going through. What are the main reasons for that innovation lag, I guess, and the promise that it holds of the productivity boosts that is yet to happen?
Yes, thank you, Wayne, for that question. It's a very interesting question and also a very difficult one. But when you look at recent decades, I think what we've seen is that there has been a lack of what economists call general purpose technologies. Now, those are technologies that are very broad, that affect all sectors, all companies, all skills, all workers. And these are technologies that are capable of generating value and increasing productivity growth. We miss those technologies. Again, as an example of technologies that look like that, think about electricity. Think about the development of transportation like the airline industry. Think about more recently the development of the internet. Those are perfect examples of general purpose technologies. Now, in contrast to these technologies, think about other things that have been sort of on the front page of the technology news. Think about TikTok. Think about Pokemon Go. Those are not general purpose technologies. They're interesting. They're very disruptive if you are into the business of video games or social media industry, but they do not have a big effect on the productivity of all of us. In fact, some of you might say from a cynical point of view that it reduces our productivity as opposed to increase it. But as we look forward, what do we see? We see technologies that you see many of the speakers today discussing them. Artificial intelligence, cloud computing, automation, the use of big data. Now, these are technologies that if you think about them, they're very broad, they're very general. They do look like electricity, like the internet. So in principle, these could be the catalyst for productivity growth going forward. They are becoming mature. Many of them are ready for liftoff, but we have to be careful. Many times we've been promised the moon and then we didn't get there. We need to make our effort. We cannot take this progress for granted. I think all of us together, all of our organizations, they need to invest and they need to embrace these technologies to turn them into a true miracle. In my view, the use of these technologies and truly making them as powerful as they look like will be the key definition of what a successful business will look like going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Antonio. So Martin, if we can go back to earlier on, I want to drill down a little bit into what you mentioned about the importance of the right culture and skill set for innovation. So taking our changing way of working, what management practices do you think are required to empower people to connect socially, to collaborate, to learn, and also to innovate?
Yeah, I think the smartest corporates recognize that innovation is a team sport, right? We've covered the first part of that, which is you have to trust people, you have to listen to people. But I think as well, there's a second part, which is, get the best players on your team. Don't keep it too small. So what I mean by that is don't try and innovate from the boardroom with a very small select group of C-level people. You need to really be sort of empowering, enabling and listening to a wider base of people who are probably more in touch on a day-to-day basis with the market than you are. I think sort of maybe more practically, the sort of second thing that I've seen a lot of corporates doing, which I think is working very, very well, is sort of, I guess, ultimately recognizing that, innovation doesn't respect a 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. boundary, and that there's a move towards, focus on anywhere operations. So, embracing the fact that mobile devices will be used, people will need to be accessing their work life across all different time zones, different locations, different devices, and really embracing that remote first sort of company operational model. And then I think that maybe the final part that's worth mentioning is, obviously there's been a gradual shift towards sort of automation, right? Towards the use of software and digital systems. But I think what the smartest corporates are doing now is they're treating this whole situation as an opportunity and actually focusing on hyper automation. So this is a broader trend towards trying to unlock the workforce away from being involved in day-to-day repetitive, rote, tactical tasks, and towards freeing them up to be involved in more sort of purely human, creative and strategic sort of tasks. So some examples there would be sort of really investing in natural language processing to allow the analysis of processing and analysis and categorization of emails before employees have to sort of pour through them and read them, or using predictive analytics in retail to decide and give a flag when you should be, restocking things, so that you're reducing the inefficiency of humans having to be involved in those processes, or using optical character recognition to categorize and analyze lots of documents across finance or across legal or across, whichever part of the business. So I think this is a true and ripe and rich example of using technology to unlock and enable a more creative, more responsive human sort of form of innovation.
Excellent, thank you. So it's basically kind of let the machines do what they're good at and use the humans for, the stuff they're good at, essentially.
Amen.
Excellent. Okay, so how are you dealing with the changed environment and the changed skill set requirements in your team? Michael, would you have anything to add to that? I mean, how have you seen things in your world?
I think what it has done is focus particularly the finance teams being on flexibility and agility, which probably traditionally weren't always words that first popped into your head when you spoke to the finance team. I think the other thing is that piece around agility is really giving us the opportunity to sort of focus on the high value items within finance that we do, the real sort of outcomes. Over time, last sort of number of years, we've probably got involved in a lot of manual or sort of non-value add work, which we think is valuable, but isn't really. I think what the changing environment has done is allow us to pivot a bit and focus on real, I suppose, core finance value add work, be that sort of back to basics and focus on sort of the controllership side, or actually providing real sort of business partnering rather than lots of MI and, as Sandra said, his sort of historical type information. That's probably been the biggest change. Skill set wise, I think it's actually we've actually started to embrace using the technology more. So yes, we've just implemented Oracle in the cloud, and that's been a great success. But actually, just using things like Teams and Zooms and all the things which traditionally in the finance team we weren't probably the quickest movers on because we felt we had to sit next to people. I think that's been really interesting to see. And I think that'll be an interesting journey that we take over the next few years on what happens as we start, working differently.
Excellent. So embracing innovative ways of working.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Sandra, would you have anything to add to that?
Well, I definitely think the pandemic has certainly given us all time to reflect. We really are questioning how we're spending our time, with whom, doing what. I think organizations, to both points made before, we have to be more consciously aware of what's best for our teams. But I do believe wholeheartedly that I think we're going to get a deeper level of engagement from our teams, and it is going to have a win situation for both the organization and the employee in the longer term. I think it'll be a little bit of a balancing act and getting that kind of optimum position, but I do think it's going to work well in the longer term. Most certainly in Oracle Finance, with the journey that we've been on for the automated close, the team is passionate and energized and focused to bring the vision to life. And with bandwidth organically created within the team through innovation and efficiency, natural skills have really came to the foreground, and skills that we hadn't seen. We've seen in pockets, but we haven't seen as advanced or developed. So the skills that are really driving proactive innovation, there's complex scenario data modeling, enhanced critical thinking, which would have always been on the edge, but really now further into more predictive, preemptive problem solving before they even starts, is an interesting view, and also massively on digital intelligence as well. Just as an example, the team have created data visuals and models and new applications in our EPM suite, Oracle Analytics Cloud. And they've really harnessed these new applications with little digital skills before that, or application skills. They've really jumped in and got to grips with it and created some really meaningful analytics that enables them to do their controllership role better, but also faster, which is interesting. So what I would say is, even through the pandemic, by affording the team the time to spend time researching, reviewing, getting more advanced knowledge of the technology, we have seen that we've unleashed a whole new level of skill sets within the team that was possibly underutilized or dormant prior to the pandemic, but also our transformation journey.
Fantastic. So giving them ownership, they've been innovative and I guess embrace innovative culture to work smarter and faster.
Yep.
Very good. So last question, Antonio. With your broad global experience, what would your guiding principles be for companies that are wanting to innovate to succeed in the current climate?
That's a good question. I think, let me highlight two things, which are probably a summary of many of the insights that previous speakers have said. One thing that I think is incredibly important is that companies need to understand the shifting consumer trends. Again, we have many things that are shifting. There's aging, there's also new products for a younger generation, additional globalization, COVID-related changes that a few speakers have mentioned. And understanding these trends is going to be key to develop new products and new products that will come out of the innovation. And then within the organization, what I'm looking for is at all levels, I want the organization to embrace innovation. At the leadership level, what I'm looking for is aspiration and commitment to innovation in a way which is not just words, but setting the right priorities. When it comes to the organizational structure, again, you've heard it many times, agility, alertness, readiness for change. I think that's going to be key. And then everywhere in the organization, I'm looking for talent. I'm looking for the right type of talent. I'm looking for diverse talent to ensure execution and to ensure the ability to scale up the business.
Excellent. Thank you, Antonio. I'm actually just making notes here. So things that stood out for me was agility, talent, and also diversity within that talent. So excellent. I'd like to thank our panelists for their time today. Been really useful to hear what you guys are doing and the things that you have enabled to, I guess, foster continuous innovations and harness opportunities that might lie ahead for you. And I guess, to sum it up, it's up to each and every one of us as finance leaders to invest in, the talents and technologies that can position us for success in the near future and beyond. We at Oracle are here to stand with you and help you on this journey and be a partner on your journey to continuous innovation.